Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as right now it's time to opt in with this little guy. Yes, for today's viewing pleasure, we're taking a look at Mastermind Creations' Optus Pexus, which is their take on an IDW Cybertronian Optimus Prime. Now, this one comes courtesy of the wonderful TF Source, so you will of course find a link to their site in the video description below in case you want to go ahead and order this guy. But if you're still on the fence, then we're going to be doing a full overview today and lots of comparisons and all of that kind of good stuff. So by the end of this video, we should have worked out if he's worth the money or not. Let's take a look. Box itself is kind of wee, but there's lots of lovely product photography on the front and back, as you can see just here, plenty of promo shots, and it's fairly typical Mastermind Creations fare, but it looks really, really good. Anyway, enough of all that gubbins, it's time to go ahead and get him all checked out. After all, who doesn't love a good Optimus Prime, eh? Right, well, included in the box, you've got the toy itself, a couple of mean-looking dark grey cannons with some nice silver paint applications on the side just there, they look cool. An identically moulded pair of cannons in a lighter grey, but still with some nice silver paint applications, so don't know why there's two sets, but we'll find out, I'm sure. This pair of silver guns, which clip onto the sides of his arms in robot mode and quite clearly take a bit of inspiration from the smokestacks from Optimus's more traditional earthen-based vehicle mode. We got a matrix, of course, because that's now a prerequisite for every single Optimus Prime toy under the sun, and this one looks pretty nice, actually. And the last accessory here is a pair of thumbs, I'm guessing, because I assume they're thumbs and not fingers, who knows? But we'll find out as we go through what they're for. And of course, there's a set of instructions and a character card as well. Might be worth me mentioning that the instructions have a very cool comic inside as well. Some lovely artwork in there. It looks really, really great. Worth checking out. Anyway, let's talk about that alternate mode, shall we? Because as I said earlier, this is a take on a Cybertronian Optimus Prime, so of course it's going to look a little bit of a departure from his classic earthen look, but I really, really like it. I think it's very clean and looks pretty good on the whole. I mean, really, there's not a lot to let you know that this is Optimus, apart from the colour scheme. The old red, blue and silver is probably what clues you into that fact, whereas, you know, if it was an entirely different colour scheme, I don't think you'd guess just from the sculpt alone. But that isn't to say that there isn't a lot of nice stuff going on here. And it does feel like the whole thing rolls quite nicely as well. A little bit of give on mine, actually, just kind of on the back set of the wheels there, but I'm fairly certain with a bit of adjustment you can get it sitting on all 6 tyres. Now, I do think the front of the vehicle mode is where this thing shines the most, because it's the most kind of purposeful anyway. There is a little bit of an element of the back just being like a folded up pair of legs, as we'll see, but certainly from a front angle, this thing kind of shines. I mean, there is a wee bit of mess going on here, maybe, you know, just kind of joints and things like that being just a touch too obvious for my tastes, but it kind of gets away with it as well on the grounds of this being a Cybertronian alt mode. You know, that's kind of a bit of a cover-all for a lot of sins in a lot of cases, isn't it, really? I mean, just here you can see a bit of a close-up on some of those joints that I'm talking about. It's not bad at all, it's just, you know, they are there if you go looking for them, ultimately. I really like the blue that they've got on the front here, though. That looks great, and it's obviously a nice callback to Optimus's windows, traditionally. And the same goes for these little gold highlights just there, little paint applications, which do recall the top of his cab, again, in his more traditional appearance. I think that's a nice little nod. The windshield itself looks great, bit of translucent plastic atop a bit of sparkly paint or something there. That looks really, really nice, and a couple more gold highlights just there on top as well. That's all good stuff. Now, the wheels feel suitably chunky and adorable. They're not rubber or anything like that, but they do look pretty impressive. Now, as already kind of hinted to, I do feel that this midsection here is a bit of a miss. I mean, it's not too bad, but there's definitely an obvious sense of like these being thighs kind of folded up, and then just the arms there. You can just see a little whiff of hand poking out from what's clearly a knee. So I don't know, if you go looking for it, those elements are there, but you know, as I already kind of alluded to, that's very common on a lot of Optimus alt modes. And you know, also in common with a lot of Optimus vehicle modes, it kind of falls down a little bit at the back, doesn't it? But still, it's okay. Anyway, we've got a couple of bits to add on here to kind of complete the look. So first, you want to get those grey weapons, those kind of silvery weapons, just plugged in on the sides, like so. And then there's 2 blasters kind of clipped together. And then you'll see just here, there's a corresponding little tab to a tab hole. Peg hole, there we go. They just kind of slot on like so. And there we go, he's looking pretty mean now. I really like the look with the extra guns on the top. And the silver weapons on the side actually do fill in the look a little bit as well. And because they correspond the colour with the kind of thighs and everything underneath, that kind of ties it in a little bit, I think. And yeah, actually, it's kind of made the whole thing feel a little bit more cohesive for me in many ways. To the point where, yeah, actually I can say I'm digging it. On the whole, it's a bit of a new take. It's not your traditional thing in the world of Optimus Optimus Primes. I mean, there are so many now anyway, and yeah, I can get on board with this, definitely. He does feel really good in hand though, and he's got the usual MMC mark of quality, really nice finish. Really love the red going on here, a couple of painted sections that look excellent, and just generally like he feels slightly heavy, even though he's not too large, and I really like the kind of finish on offer and all of that. I just think he presents wonderfully. So all told, it's a pretty good start for this guy, but let's go ahead and check out transformation and then see how we get on in robot mode. Right then, that's transformation done, and you know what, on the whole, that really wasn't too bad. I mean, there's a couple of bits that are maybe a tiny bit fiddly, but if anything, the only real major challenge here is how stiff some of the joints are, particularly in the arms and the legs, and you really have to give it a bit of old welly to get it moving. Not that that's a bad thing at all, mind, but there were a couple of moments where I thought, is this actually the way that I'm supposed to be moving this piece? Just because of how much force was kind of required to like twist a joint or something like that. But realistically, everything's fairly straightforward and it all comes together quite nicely. We'll talk more about the design of them in just a minute, but in terms of transformation, the legs is really interesting. Just the way that these shins essentially split open and the way that this little piston kind of clips into the top just there, into the knee joint. Never really seen anything like that before, actually. It's, I mean, not overly complicated, but still kind of cool. Worth me also saying that on the whole, everything tabs together pretty nicely, particularly in the backpack. I really like the way that the wheels kind of tab into the sides of the backpack there. I think that's very, very cool and quite satisfying. The only bits that maybe are a bit different are the kind of ab section just here, and some of the arms doesn't really have like a defined place as such, but all of that clearly plays into the articulation, which we'll check out in just a minute. But yeah, it's not that it doesn't tab in, it's just kind of quite a fluid design, I think. Now, in terms of the look, I was of course drawn to this guy from a lot of the promotional photography that we saw before he was released, and in hand he doesn't really disappoint either. I mean, it's your classic Optimus archetype in many ways, but there's some really kind of neat stuff going on here. Now, the head sculpt's a bit of an interesting one, because although it is classic Optimus in many regards, it's still got a bit of a stylized nature to it as well. I mean, it's got a very kind of rounded quality, and those antennae are very pointed as well, almost kind of like horns. I don't know, there's something almost a bit bullish about this guy to my eye. I can't really put my finger on it. Face sculpt itself, though, is a bit of a belter. I mean, he certainly looks pretty mean. It's quite a small head sculpt overall, so the detail on there is really kind of appreciated. Love the little blue eyes, the vent on the top of the head looks cool, even little molded vents in the sides of the, just either side of the mouth plate. And yeah, overall, I think it's a winner. Of course, he's got a fairly distinctive take on the Optimus Prime chest with those windows either side and the kind of cowcatcher look going on in the middle. I'm sure that's not what it's meant to be at all, but that's just kind of what it reminds me of, hey-ho. And then if you come down a little bit, he's got his signature kind of grill abs going on there, which is kind of nice, and the crotch piece, it looks pretty cool as well. All in all, I think that's all really successful. I like the way these smokestack pieces have ended up on the shoulders there, and between you and me, I may have just forgotten to do that during transformation, so don't tell anybody, will you? You know, and it has to be said, I'm really feeling the kind of bulky upper torso on this guy. I really like the kind of curvy aspect to it as well, and it's it's enough of a departure to kind of set it apart, while still, as I say, having some of those classic elements. I kind of feel like this is how you do an Optimus redesign. Similar story on the back. I think it looks really, really tidy. I really like the way that these wheels clip on the sides just there, and just overall I think it looks good. Just coming down to the lower half, and the legs are pretty much what you'd expect, I think, in a lot of senses. You know, the kind of your classic Optimus legs, wheels on the side just there, but they do look kind of good. Slightly small feet, I think. I don't know, there's something about the proportions of these legs that just look a little bit odd to me somehow, and I do think part of that is the small feet, but overall they're good. And there is evidence of those slightly strange proportions elsewhere as well, but overall I do feel like this guy's very handsome indeed. I feel like they've crafted a really nice robot form without too much compromise to the vehicle mode, and I feel like it's a bit of a success. Anyway, let's talk accessories, because the first thing we want to do is get these silver guns just pegged in on the sides of his arms like so. Then of course you're going to want to put his other rifle guns in his hand, and to do that you just kind of flip out the little handle like so, and then of course you want to just go ahead and peg them into the middle of the palm like so, and wrap the fingers round. Yeah, and they fit really nicely into his hands just there. Look really, really good. I like the way that you can get the trigger finger in the right position there. That's always a good sign, and they feel very secure as well. But wait, there's more. As you may remember, there's this second set of grey guns as well, and what you can do here is just kind of flip these backpack sections up like so, and then that gives you a couple of different tabs where they can be installed for kind of shoulder weapons. Now the first example of that is using these little pegs on the side and the little corresponding peg holes in the guns, and they just kind of sit like that. That actually looks really, really cool. I like the look, although I will say that they're not the most secure. Like, they just kind of feel like they're going to wobble off at any point, so they're just sort of balanced, if anything. Really not very secure on those pegs. So it does look good, but practicality-wise, not so much. Now, what maybe works a little bit better and does feel more secure is if you actually flip the guns over, there's another tab just on the top of them at the back, and that corresponds to this little peg just there. So you can just kind of go ahead and slot it in like so, and I think it looks equally cool. Kind of sits on the shoulder really nicely, and it feels a lot more secure. I mean, yeah, I actually think that looks pretty kick-ass, and it's not a phrase that I use very often, but it certainly applies in this situation. I think especially what's cool is that they're actually kind of retractable as well, because of the way that those wheel arches fold backwards. So you know, they can kind of fold back onto his backpack, and I think that it works nicely. And what's kind of interesting is that it actually only mentions one set of weapons in the instructions, so I don't know what the deal is with the grey set versus the black set. I mean, of course they're completely interchangeable, so you could have the black set on his shoulders if you prefer, but this is just how I've got it, and I do think that it looks really, really cool, and I like the fact that they can kind of be folded away as well. I think that's it's really good fun. Yeah, but between those 4 sets of guns and the ones on his arms as well, he looks a bit beefy. He's definitely ready for battle, let's put it that way. Now, I did say that we'd solve the mystery of the additional digit, and indeed it turns out to be a finger. And I guess it doesn't mention it in the instructions, but I guess they're just included in case you break one, maybe? I don't know, because they are kind of fiddly, the hands, as we'll see in just a moment. But I guess that's what that's about. All of which brings us keenly on to the Matrix. And of course, as I said earlier, every Optimus Prime toy worth its salt these days comes with a Matrix accessory, and it's no different here. This one's kind of nice. It's got some slightly kind of flimsy-ish handles on it, but as we'll see, that's because they come off for transformation. The look of it is really nice, with some gold paint on the outer casing and a kind of bit of translucent green on the inside, all of which, makes it look exactly like it should, so it's certainly a handsome thing. And he does a fairly good job at doing the old light our darkest hour pose as well, although I'm not going to lie, this was a total faff to achieve. And that's mainly because of how fiddly the hands are to start with. I mean, super articulated, as we'll see, but also the fact that these handles on the Matrix actually fall off quite easily as well, and then you've got the fact that only 3 of the 4 fingers will actually kind of slot through the handles. So yeah, all in all, a bit of a faff. Nice result though. I mean, I'm kind of willing to forgive it, to be honest, how fiddly it is, just because it's winning for me in terms of aesthetics alone. There's just something about the look of this guy that kind of carries it all over the finish line, if nothing else. Now, you can fit his Matrix into the chest as well, but in order to do that, you actually have to kind of mistransform him quite a bit. So firstly, you have to open up the back, then you have to fold his arms backwards out of the way, and then all of that should give you enough clearance to get your finger in from behind, although not mine, because mine apparently are too large, but the idea is to get them in and actually push the thing here out from the back. It's very fiddly, needless to say, because it's just not going to go otherwise. There we go. I'm actually having to ram my finger in as as hard as I can. This is weird, isn't it? But there we go. We've just about got it, but it's not easy at all. Needless to say, and my finger's stuck now, so that's fun. And once you've got your finger out, again, you will see, of course, you've got a big old hole just there. That's what you've got to get your finger into. It's very, very tight space, though, as I've already said. And that will close up if you kind of reattach the backpack again. But let's get our matrix in anyway. Now, weirdly, as I already mentioned, you do actually have to unattach the little handles like so, and that's the bit that's going to go in his chest. So here we go, the moment of truth. You just kind of plonk it in like so, and yeah, looks okay. Looks okay, I suppose. I don't know. It just kind of, yeah, it doesn't really sit very securely. It just kind of rotates round, if anything. That is odd. I don't know. I guess once you get it in the right position, it actually does look kind of cool. And I do kind of like the idea of these sliding open panels just there. I mean, of course, let's go ahead and close them up now, as they're supposed to be. But yeah, it's a weird one how fiddly that is. And actually now, look, I can't get them to sit all that flush even. So maybe that needs a bit more fiddling with. Yeah, even after a bit more fiddling, I cannot get those panels on his chest to sit completely flush with the matrix in place, so that's a little bit annoying. And I do think that actually the overall faff of getting it in there, having to mistransform it, get your finger in from the back and all of that, it's not really worth it for me. Like, it's just a feature I'd never use, to be honest. So some kind of cool gimmicks along the way, but another one actually is the articulation, because this toy is super, super posable. Loads of joints all through the thing, as we'll see. So starting with the head, I mean, it's very, very posable, and the neck moves as well, can look up and down, so you've got a lot of free motion there. The neck is a little bit weird, actually. It has a bit of a tendency to kind of have this little visual break just there and kind of sit backwards, so you kind of need to keep tilting it forward. But still tons of movement there. Now the shoulders have actually got multiple joints in them again. You can see just there it's got a little double hinge going on. These are very, very tight going that way, so that's kind of nice. No real worries about them flopping or anything like that. And they are on a little butterfly as well, so you've got a bit of movement even that way, so absolutely tons going on. And there is even a bit of movement there, so yeah, very posable. Now one of the tightest joints on this whole thing is actually at the elbows, and again they are double hinged elbows, so they will go all the way up and all the way out as well, and yeah, really quite a lot happening at those elbows. And then he's got super articulated hands as well. I mean, these are absolutely insane. Each finger, they will actually splay out as well, but each finger has several joints running through it, as you can see just there, and the thumb as well, and a little ball joint. You've also got wrist swivel and a little wrist kind of bit of movement like that as well. So yeah, ridiculously articulated hands all told. If anything, maybe too articulated for my taste. I don't know, maybe that's a bit of a unique complaint, but I kind of prefer things a bit simpler, if anything, but they do feel good quality, to be fair. They don't feel like they're going to come off or break the things at all, so that's really good. Now, you do, of course, have a bit of a waist swivel, just like that, and you do have an ab crunch as well, but what you also get is a bit of an ab rock from side to side, so you can see there are multiple points of articulation just in this, in the kind of ab section just there, so it will kind of rock from side to side. That really reminds me, actually, of the kind of 3-0 figures and the amount of articulation you get out of them, so that's really nice. Worth talking about the hips just for a minute, and what is interesting is these hip flaps and the way that they kind of move up, because they're on like a little joint mechanism, so they will actually kind of fold up out of the way like so, and you can actually, if you really want to, kind of rotate them all the way over so that they kind of sit like that, or really however you want them. I've kind of had a quick play around with it, and I've actually found it really useful. Like, they're actually quite intelligent how they work, because they kind of get out of the way quite easily, and then there is a bit of a hip flap situation at the side as well, although they're kind of a bit more static, and then the hips themselves will go way past 90, as you can see, which is really, really, really very good. Then there's little extra joints just here. You can see, actually, as well as the way that the legs move normally, there's this little hinge that just kind of comes out like so, so it all helps with the articulation. And then at the knees, it's a very, very, very tight joint again. You've got that little piston just in there, which is very cool. Kind of reminds me of MP1, if anything. But that will go, I mean, certainly past 90 degrees all the way around for a very convincing bend. You know, you're going to get a great kneel out of that. And then you've got ankle tilt as well going on, and even a bit of toe articulation, so that's cool. All of which adds up to one of the most convincingly articulated toys I've played with in a long time. Let me tell you, this is a real feature of this toy. Just the articulation alone makes it worthwhile. Like, it's just stunning. I mean, come on, how many Transformers toys, official or none, do you know that can pull off a pose like that? And it's super easy to get him to do this kind of stuff as well, which just makes it all the more rewarding. It's going to be so much fun to take photos of. Now, he's a little bit fiddly, and there is a bit of readjustment that needs to be done every so often, like the legs kind of sliding back into the knees and things like that, but the results are definitely worth it. I'm honestly having an absolute blast posing this guy, and as I say, can't wait to do the photos as well. And it's yeah, he's just really quite incredible. If you like articulated Transformers, this guy is on the money. Now, in terms of comparisons, here he is with the original lad himself. This is Generation 1 Optimus Prime, and you can see that actually he is a little bit taller, needless to say, but still not entirely massive. And I think that's as evidenced here with MP10, Masterpiece MP10 Convoy, and then you've got Transform Element Op Leader as well, standing in on the kind of third party and Masterpiece front of things. And as you can see, Optus Pexus is nowhere near as tall as either of these guys. So he's a little bit smaller, but I think he's a good size, actually. I mean, if anything, he kind of sits somewhere in between Masterpiece and Generations. You can see him here with Earthrise Optimus Prime, after all. And yeah, it's a curious one. I think I kind of like what they've done with it height-wise. I think he's not too big, he's not too small. Maybe he's just right. Now, here he is with Fans Hobby Naval Commander. This is the smaller robot form from that guy, and you can see that he's just a little bit larger in robot form, and stylistically, actually, they work surprisingly well together, if anything. On the whole, then, there's plenty of nice things to say about Optus Pexus. I mean, he's got a very nice vehicle mode, an excellent robot mode, tons of articulation, some nice features. I mean, the Matrix thing is a bit of a write-off in my opinion, but on the whole, there's no doubt for me that this guy is worth getting. It's a toot. But where are you at with this guy? Do you like what you see? Not so sure? Let me know in the comments below. And you will of course find a link to TF Source's listing for him in the video description as well, so you can go ahead and order that if indeed he does take your fancy. And don't forget to drop me a like for today's video, that would be very much appreciated. And otherwise, that's it from me, so have a great rest of your day, and TTFN.